welcome to another episode of Sum of Our Parts, the podcast where two friends talk about the movies that add up to make us who we are. I'm Lindsay,
And I'm Jim.
and this week Jim picked for us, and we have another double feature.
A twofer.
Yes. So, Jim, tell us about what you picked.
Well, since we're stepping off into the new decade, new year, and then also a new administration, I picked the Manchurian Candidate.
Excellent. And also, this episode comes out on January 6th, 2025. January 6th, just a day, doesn't remind us of anything
Not
that
at all.
happened in our recent political history. So, yeah, why not have a political thriller for this day?
And
And
actually, well, two. I mean,
two
even
political thrillers. Yes,
two
two for the
political.
price of one, once again. And one of them contains Denzel Washington again.
Imagine that.
Denzel Washington, king of the remakes. So we have both the Manchurian Candidate from 1962 and the one from 2004. Both are based on a book that came out in 1959 by the author Richard Condon. The 1962 version was directed by John Frankenheimer, who directed a lot of, as you were saying, Jim, like political thrillers. He directed things like Birdman of Alcatraz, 7 Days in May, Black Sunday, The Island of Dr. Moreau, Ronin.
Hmm.
It was written by George Axelrod, who wrote the original play, The 7 Year Itch, which I think people know the Marilyn Monroe movie. He wrote the play that was based on. He also wrote the screenplay for Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh,
So,
I
some
did not know
iconic
that.
things. The 2004 version of The Manchurian Candidate was directed by Jonathan Demme, who directed, I think, most famously, Silence of the Lambs. He also directed Married to the Mob, Something Wild, Stop Making Sense, which was the movie in the 80s about the Talking Heads. He directed Philadelphia, Beloved, Rachel Getting Married, and his last movie was Ricky and the Flash, which is a really bad movie with Meryl Streep in it. The 2004 version was written by Daniel. Obviously, it was based on the previous screenplay, but it was updated by Daniel Pine, who wrote Any Given Sunday. He wrote the, I think, either 90s or 2000s version of the film Doc Hollywood. He had also written for the TV series Miami Vice, and
Mm.
he wrote the 2007 film Fracture. Dean Georgaris wrote some movies like Tristan and Isolde, which came out in 2006. He also wrote The Meg, about the big megalodon shark, and he also wrote The Meg 2, The Trench. So he's killing it these days.
Good screen time, anyway.
He's the things are getting made. So Jim, what kind of made you pick these movies? Like, what do you remember like seeing the first one for the first time?
62. I did not see it at the movie theater. I rememred,
You're a
though,
little young for
I
this
was a little
subject
young.
matter.
Yeah, I was 5 years old. So I remember when with the first time I saw the movie, or around the first time, some of the things that one was it was about the Korean War, which my dad it was a veteran of the Korean War,
Hmm.
so that was it had a drawing to me that, and I like movies like this where there's plot twists, and it sort of reminded me of some of the James Bond movies that came out
Hmm.
later on, that and there's government conspiracies, and there's no gadgets or anything in this, but there is what I guess they term later spycraft and so on and so forth
Hmm.
about working agents and running agents, and then it was about the brainwashing and prisoners of war. So and I coming into like I said, the a new administration and everything, it just reminded me of how the mechanism worked. I've always been drawn to politics. I
Hmm.
was a political science major in college. Not that that was worth anything, but just how government works, and what is set up for checks and balances. But then there's always these conspiracy theories or things that are floating around. And I think the Manchurian Candidate, the original, did a really good job of bringing that maybe out into the open and showing maybe exposing it a little bit. And it also smacked of the McCarthyism of the late
Hmm.
50s, Senator Eugene McCarthy, or
Hmm.
Tail Gunner Joe, as they like to call him back in the days. I had never seen the entire 2004 version until
Hmm.
we watched it for this, though. So, but I was struck about how well it was done.
Yeah.
And the casting and so on, and even we'll talk about some of there's not a lot of big plot changes or anything, but some of the subtle changes probably were even improved upon on the original movie.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So, and had you ever seen either of these movies?
I had not. I had
Okay,
not. I remember when the 2004 one came out, like I remember seeing ads for it, but I think I was 14 at the time and like it was not something
sure.
that interested me. Seeing something about like politics and like the war on terror, I was like, I get too much of that. I went to school in a military base in the post 9/11 world. I was like, I don't need any more of this
Fine.
in my life. Yeah, I hadn't seen it, and I had only learned more about the 1962 version more recently when Angela Lansbury died, and that people brought that up as a kind of iconic performance of
Mm-hmm.
hers. I think because like what I know Angela Lansbury for and like people of my age and then like that is it's very different, right? If because I think of like Mrs. Potts and Murder She Wrote and not like a ruthless behind the scenes like political operative. And I think but like you said, I think that is an interesting part of both of them, like the behind the scenes of like the politics and like the jockeying and who gets to like step into these leadership positions and the way that some of it is like just sort of gamesmanship and like fake and contrived, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that feels very like real and realistic. And then you add in the sort of like villainous kind of stuff. And I think, it's interesting to like see who the villain is in both of them. That's kind of one of the changes. And obviously it relates to like the time period in which they take place. But yeah, it's very interesting. So I guess we can talk a little bit about the differences and then maybe we can kind of go through like the
Sure.
general plot. Because like you said, the general plot is pretty similar. There are some changes, some related, a lot of them related to the time period, and
Mm-hmm.
some just some changing around of like the plot and character stuff. But I mean, number one change is like the time period. So the first one takes place like 1954, I guess it is. Um,
52, actually. The with the opening scene, they're
the
on.
opening scenes in 52,
Yeah.
but they later say, well, 2 years ago when we were in the war. So I think
War,
like
right.
the
Yeah.
action at the like
Mm-hmm.
the election and stuff is like 1954.
Evidently, yeah.
So yeah, whatever, early 50s. So like you said, it's kind of era of McCarthyism. The people are veterans of the Korean War. The 2004 one takes place, it seems around that time,
Yeah.
but
I got
the
that feeling.
war was the first Persian Gulf War. So the war events take place in 1991 in
Mm-hmm.
Kuwait.
Right.
I will also say the one of the differences there is that we see a little bit more of what happened in the 1962 one
Mm-hmm.
than in the 2004. The 2004 one we don't really get there until much later of like seeing a little bit of what actually happened. But in the 1962 one you see the people being kidnapped, which we'll get
Right.
into when we get into the plot. 2004 one you see the planted story unfold, and not the real events until much later. So we find out when the character finds out versus
Right.
in the 1962 version we get a little sense of what's going on and then more unfolds later, I feel
Right.
like.
Yeah, we get the backstory a lot earlier in the
Yeah.
1962 version, like you said
Yeah.
about the actual versus what has been put
Hmm.
in their heads. So,
Yes, yes. The villains again are different. And this goes to the time period. So like it's communists from like China and Russia that do the bad stuff. In That's in the 1962 version. In the 2004 version, it's like a big corporation that's sort of like defense contractor. Of course, they're the villains of the 2000s version. So in the Manchurian part, like in the 1962 version, they are taken to Manchuria, the region in China.
Hmm.
In the 2004 version, the company that does this is called Manchurian Global. So that's a little bit different. Again, it relates to I think the time period more than anything. The mechanisms of how they control. So if you don't know much about this movie, we'll get into the general plot, but suffice to say that soldiers are kidnapped and brainwashed. So in the 1962 version, it's through like hypnosis. In the 2004 version, it's more like medical scientific experimentation. They have chips implanted, stuff like that. And then the trigger mechanism for they create some like sleeper agents. The trigger mechanism's different. So in 1962, it's cards. So it's the Queen of Diamonds. So they prompt the person to, don't you want to play some solitaire?
Hmm.
And then as soon as he sees the Queen of Diamonds, that kind of snaps
The
him into
the Red
the
Queen,
Red Queen. But
right?
the card they show us is the Queen
She's
of
the Queen of
Diamonds.
Diamonds. Yeah,
So why wasn't it the Queen of Hearts? She's also a
that
Red Queen.
that's what I was gonna. But you're right. It's always the Queen of Diamonds that they show. Whenever it comes up in the deck of cards. So.
Yeah. So that's what I thought. I was like, what? What? But anyways,
Hmm.
and that snaps him into the sort of like hypnosis suggestible state. In the 2004 version, it's a series of words, which is basically just like your name.
It's yeah. It's the
It's like
first and last name, then
yes.
the last name, and then the first, middle, and last name, or something like
Yeah.
that. It's like that.
With like the rank at some point, I forget.
Yeah. So.
Um, but yeah, so it's a verbal cue. So those are more like the time period related differences. The other differences, like we mentioned, there are some character differences. So in the 1962 version, basically all of this is a plot to sort of like put forth a candidate to be vice president and eventually become president. So in the 1962 version, it is there's a main character named Raymond Shaw. In the 1962 version, it's his stepfather. So his mother is married to a senator and they're trying to elevate him. In the 2004 version, it is Raymond Shaw himself. He's a congressman and they're trying to elevate him, which I think also makes sense because in the 2004 version, the distance between the military action and like the events of the story is bigger. So there would
Hmm.
actually be time for like him to get into politics and stuff.
Right.
And his mom, Eleanor Shaw, is a senator in the 2004 version. Another kind of character difference is the other main character is named Bennett Marco. In the 1962 version, he had also been like hypnotized, but he wasn't made like a sleeper agent. Whereas in the 2004 version, Major Marco is a sleeper agent. So he was kind of as involved as the other sleeper agent, which is Raymond Shaw. And then the last major difference is there's a character named Rosie who exists kind of as in the 1962 version, she's basically there as a love interest for Major Marco. Whereas in the 2004 version, she has a bit more of a role. She actually turns out, spoiler alert, to be a Fed who's kind of also investigating this conspiracy, which is kind of interesting because it makes the conspiracy a little bigger because you don't actually know at first when you find out she's a Fed, like, is she in on it or is
Exactly.
she trying to take it down? It adds a little more intrigue and I think makes some of the actions make a little bit more sense. But again, I think that some of that is time period. Um, because in 1962, presumably you're a woman, you meet a man on a train, you get a call that he beat someone up and you go bail him out of jail. In 2004, you don't do that.
And also in the 1962 version, you dump your fiance, give him back his ring after you've met this guy for like 10 minutes, and he
Yes.
more or less bolts on you.
Yes. You meet
And
him and he's not doing well.
he's a mess. I even wrote down he's a mess. And
He's sweating, he's freaking out.
there's a lot of sweating going on in both of these movies.
There is.
But both Marcos perspire a lot.
They
So
do. They do. That's
we're,
like the visual cue of like this man is struggling.
exactly. So yeah, there when as soon as you see the sweat on the upper lip and the brow,
Hmm.
somebody's having a tough time.
It's rough. Yeah. So those are kind of the major differences, and we'll kind of touch on them as we go through the plot. Should we talk a little bit about kind of who's who, I
Sure.
guess?
And
Because great casts in both of these movies. I think especially for me, if you watch the 2004 version, like literally like every shot, even just like beyond the main cast that we're gonna go through, like you get cameos from Al Franken, you get Gail King, you get a little shot of Ann Dowd, you get like BB Winans, the singer, you get Sidney Lumet
yeah,
has a cameo. Director Roger Corman has a cameo. You see very young Anthony Mackie. You see Pablo Schreiber. A ton of people. Miguel Ferrer, the late Miguel Ferrer. Dean Stockwell is in it. Like, there's so many people that,
there's people that you recognize, and
well, yeah. So the main cast we can get into then. So the two main characters, well, the main character in both of them is Bennett Marco. That's kind of who we follow.
mhm.
So in the 1962 version, Bennett Marco is played by Frank Sinatra. You know who Frank Sinatra is. He's a very famous singer. If you watched any of the New Year's shows, after the ball drops, they play one of his famous songs. They play New York, New York.
New York, New York.
He won an Oscar in From Here to Eternity. He was in like movie musicals like Guys and Dolls, High Society. So he was an actor as well as a singer, which I didn't actually really know before I watched this. And I was
It,
like, oh, okay, he's doing well.
it, and actually, yeah, I thought he did a really good job in this movie.
Hmm.
One of his better roles. I mean, he did some things with Dean Martin and the Rat Pack guys.
Hmm.
For a couple. Well, he was the originator of Ocean's 11. That was
Yeah.
before George Clooney and Brad Pitt decided to remake that one. So
Hmm. In the 2004 version, I feel like he's a recurring character on I feel like we can consider him a pod favorite.
mm,
Denzel Washington plays Bennett Marco. We have this is our third, I think, Denzel Washington
yeah,
movie because we did Remember the Titans and
and
Preacher's Wife.
Preacher's Wife, and it
Yeah.
won't be our last because he's in two more movies that on my list.
And I'm sure he's in more on mine.
So,
So we're
and
gonna see
um, and
Denzel
he
again.
and he plays a soldier in both of mine.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
So, yeah,
So yeah, Denzel, I already just named a couple of things he's been in, and you know who Denzel Washington is. Raymond Shaw, who's the other kind of major character. In the 1962 version, he's played by Lawrence Harvey. Uh, Also, I'm just gonna say the accents. I looked at Lawrence Harvey as like a Lithuanian person
mm-hmm,
who emigrated to England and then South Africa. So the
mm-hmm,
accent,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
he does
Yeah,
not sound like an American, I will
he's
just
about
say.
as American as Cary Grant was. So,
Yes.
and
And I
and
think actually Cary Grant was more American because he moved to the United States at like 18.
right, I was gonna say Lawrence Harvey. He was very good in the movie, but why
Hmm.
they classified him though as an American because he doesn't act or doesn't speak at all like
Yeah,
an
he
American.
didn't even attempt an American accent at
No,
all.
no, no, no. There was
Um,
there was no hiding that. So,
yes, but another kind of prolific actor. He was in things like Butterfield 8 with
mm,
Elizabeth Taylor. He was in The Alamo, Room at the Top, other things. In the 2004 version, Raymond Shaw is played by Liev Schreiber. I thought he did a really good job, like at being like sort of blank and you
because
know,
that's what the character called for
yeah, just like
and
sort of very quiet and like not a lot there except to like kind of project on sort of.
hmm
Liev Schreiber, I think again, he's a pretty if you watch movies and TV in this time, you've seen him.
hmm
A couple highlights. He was in Asteroid City recently, the most recent Wes Anderson movie. He was on the TV show Ray Donovan.
Ray Donovan. He
He
was
played
Sabretooth.
the titular Ray Donovan. Yeah, he was in the X-Men movies as Sabretooth. He was in the first few Scream movies. He one of the other recent things he was in, there was a mini series called A Small Light about Miepke's and the Frank family, how she helped hide them. He played Otto Frank
Oh,
in that series.
did not know that.
It's very good. It's on Disney Plus. You should watch it.
Okay.
So yeah, Liev Schreiber, as I mentioned, his brother Pablo with a small cameo.
Hmm.
Um, well, small role. So Raymond Shaw's mother, Eleanor. So she's a little bit. Her name's a little bit different in both of them because she's married in one. So she's Eleanor Iselin in the 1962 version because she's married to his stepfather, and she's Eleanor Prentice Shaw in the 2004 version. But we get two powerhouse ladies
Yes.
playing her. So in 1962, she's played by Angela Lansbury. Angela Lansbury, again, as I mentioned, like Murder She Wrote, Mrs. Potts and Beauty and the Beast, Gaslight, her like first movie role. Lots of Broadway. She played like Mame and Mrs. Lovett and like all these things. Bedknobs and Broomsticks. She was, I think the last movie she was in she had a small role in the second Mary Poppins movie in Mary
Oh,
Poppins
okay.
Returns. She was a voice in the movie Anastasia for the other 90s kids. So, but you know, you've seen her. My favorite fact about her that I learned after she died. So like her family was living in Los Angeles because she was an actor, but the Manson family was like trying to like get her daughter. Like her daughter almost joined the Manson
Oh,
family.
really?
So she moved them to Ireland like cuz most of her life she lived in Ireland. Like that's why they moved to Ireland to get her kid away from the Manson family.
Well, you're going to do it right. So good for
Right? She's
her.
like, my
Yeah.
kid's not joining a cult. Get out of here. That's one of my favorite Angela Lansbury facts. She also had like a diet book, I think.
Oh, I didn't know
Um,
that.
yeah. Uh, in the 2004 version, Eleanor is played by Meryl Streep. You know who Meryl Streep is. Like,
Yep.
you've seen a
Come
Meryl
on.
Streep movie. You can't like have
Yeah.
opened your eyes and not seen Meryl Streep at some point. Like right now, she's been on Only Murders in the Building. She might be dating Martin Short. Um, she was in The Devil Wears Prada. She was in Mamma Mia. She's in Death Becomes Her, Kramer versus Kramer, Sophie's Choice. She's won a million
I
Oscars.
was getting ready to say, I think, doesn't she hold the most,
I think so.
not only the
Yeah.
most nominations, but also the most
Most
Oscars?
wins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think she just beat, like, she just edged out like Katherine Hepburn or something.
Something like that.
But yeah, like she's Meryl Streep,
Yeah.
like
So,
the Meryl Streep.
um,
Like Eugenie, or who goes by Rosie, is played in the 1962 version by Janet Leigh. You know Janet Leigh because you've seen the picture from Psycho. If you've seen the
hmm,
picture from Psycho of the lady being killed in the shower, you've seen Janet Leigh.
exactly.
If you've seen Jamie Lee Curtis, you've seen her daughter. But she was also in other things, Bye Bye Birdie, Touch of Evil, Safari, things like that. In the 2004 version, Rosie is played by Kimberly Elise. For me, she's the main lady in Diary of a Mad Black Woman.
Oh, okay.
She is the titular Mad Black Woman. But she played Denzel's wife in John Q. And she was in Beloved, actually. So another Jonathan Demme's got a few people he's returned to. She was also in the movie Set It Off. I think that was kind of her big movie break. She was in another Tyler Perry movie for Colored Girls. For me, I think of her most as the main woman in Diary of a Mad Black
Mad
Woman.
Black. Okay.
A couple other characters that are in both Senator Thomas Jordan. So that's a rival kind of senator to either Raymond Shaw or his stepdad. In the original, it's played by John McGivern, who was in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
He usually played a more lighter character. He didn't. And in this one, he's not a heavy, but he's more of a serious
Yeah.
character.
Yeah, definitely. From what I was like reading, it definitely seemed more like light comic kind of
Hmm.
things
He is.
versus
Yeah, he
this.
was very funny in some things that he
Hmm.
did. Yeah.
Yeah. In the 2004 version, he's played by John Voight, Angelina Jolie's dad, who she hasn't talked to. He has been in a lot of things. He was in Zoolander. He was in Heat. He was in Ali, Holes, Deliverance, Coming Home, Midnight Cowboy. various other things. I think he's another person that like if you've watched any movies in the last
Yeah,
like 20 years, you've
yeah.
seen him in something.
You've either seen him and as the Midnight Cowboy, walking across the street, with Rizzo, Ratso Rizzo, hey, I'm walking here.
Yeah. Is that Dustin Hoffman?
Dustin Hoffman, yeah.
Okay.
So, but yeah, another heavy hitter, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. His daughter, Senator Jordan's daughter, Jocelyn Jordan, is in both movies. In the original, she's played by Leslie Parrish, who she was in a lot of TV shows and
Mm.
movies and also like produced. I was also reading on her Wikipedia page, she was like acting and stuff was secondary. She was really into like social causes and like civil rights, so good for
Oh,
her. She was in things like For Love of Money, Three on a Couch, Lil Abner, and she was on a lot of the shows that we've talked about, like Wild Wild West, Man from Uncle, like things like that. She starred on a lot
oh,
of
okay.
those classic TV shows. In the 2004 version, Jocelyn's played by Vera Farmiga. I think she's another person that, like, if you watch movies now, you've seen her. She's in all the Conjuring movies.
Oh,
She's
okay.
Lorraine Warren. I think that's kind of her most recent like things that she's been in a lot. So she's in a lot of scary movies of late. She's in the movie Orphan. She played on the TV show Bates Motel. She played Norma Bates. She was nominated for an Oscar for the movie Up in the Air with George Clooney.
That's what I remember her from
She was in The
mostly.
Departed, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. So she's been in a ton of stuff. But yeah, like I think the Conjuring series and like Annabelle and like all those that sort of like scary movie universe has been what she's been doing most recently. Lastly, Al Melvin, who is another soldier in the company with in the unit with Bennett Marco and Raymond Shaw. He's a character in both. In the original, he's played by James Edwards, who was in things like Home of the Brave, Patton, a lot of soldier movies, and
Mhm.
he was also in the Joe Louis story. And in the 2004 version, another heavy hitter, Jeffrey Wright. He's been in a million things. He was nominated for an Oscar last year for American Fiction. He was in the Hunger Games movies. He was in The Batman. He played James Gordon in the Batman with Robert Pattinson. He
He's
was
also
also
Felix Leiter. I'm sorry, in the James Bond,
he
because
was
that's
in
where I knew him from. Was
yeah, he played Basquiat in the Basquiat movie. He was in Cadillac Records, Rustin, Angels in America. He played that on Broadway. He played a role on Broadway, and he was in the miniseries of Angels in America. So
oh, okay.
definitely, I think a pretty heavy hitting cast
Hmm.
in both occasions. Obviously, for me, like the 2004 cast, like these are all people that like I know, off top, but definitely like a lot of quite a pedigree between both movies.
Yeah, and maybe not some of the roles not as much screen time and stuff, but very pivotal in the
Hmm.
plot development and moving the story along. So,
Exactly. Yeah, like Al Melvin
oh,
gets like
oh,
one scene, maybe two in both of them,
but
but it's really important.
they're very impactful.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think both actors to their roles brought in the short period of time, a real or maybe an insight into what they were going through.
Hmm.
The suffering that they had to endure.
Yeah. So, shall we talk about the movies?
Yes.
Both movies kind of open with this unit in their combat zone. So, as we mentioned, the original, it's the Korean War, 1952. In the 2004 version, they are in Kuwait in 1991 in the first Persian Gulf War. Both times they're having fun. In the Korean War, they're hanging out with some ladies.
Hmm.
In 2004, they're in the Persian Gulf War, they're playing cards. I enjoyed that there's like a sort of like reggae version of Fortunate Son playing in the 2004 version. It sounded like Wyclef Jean doing Fortunate
That's who it
Son.
was.
Well, good. I'm glad I could hear that.
You nailed it.
Um,
Yeah. So,
but yeah, that's like fun. It opens and closes the movie, the
mhm.
2004 version. And both Bennett Marcos are kind of trying to figure out like the route for their unit, and both are working with a guide. So in the older version, they have a Korean guide, Chunjin.
Chunjin.
I will just say, first off, the people that play Asian in that movie, none of them are Asian. I'm just gonna put that out there. Uh, and I mean, they're not doing full Mickey Rooney accent. Chun Jin is approaching. The other guy doesn't do an accent at least, so I could appreciate that.
Right.
Dr. Lowe,
Yeah.
Dr. Yen Lowe does not do an accent, so at least there's that. But I was like, oh, these people are not Asian.
Well, no, because the guy that plays Chun Jin is I forget he's a well-known actor, but
Henry Silva.
Henry Silva, yeah. So, but who, yeah,
Do
is
you know what he looks like? He
not
looks
even
like in
remotely Asian.
Romeo and Michelle when Alan Cumming has a face transplant. That he
Yes,
looks like this guy.
he does. Yeah,
Everyone, please Google Henry Silva, and if you've seen Romeo and Michelle, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's like someone looked at this picture and was like, "This is what we're gonna make Sidney
make
Frank
Alan,
look like."
yeah, make Al look like Alan
Yeah,
Cumming.
that's a model of the prosthetics off that. But anyways, so they have Shunjin, and Denzel has a British guy, and spoiler alert, they both turn out to be bad. They are bad
They're
guys.
working for the wrong
Yeah,
side.
they are guiding you not to where you want to go.
Hmm.
Um, and both units end up getting ambushed. In the 1962 version, we see them being kidnapped. They get
Right.
knocked out and kidnapped. They're put on stretchers and attached to the MASH helicopters to fly them somewhere. Um,
Hmm.
in the 2004 version, we see like a firefight play out. But then we learn that the story's being told by Denzel Washington to Bennett Marco to some Boy Scouts.
Right.
Also, the
Uh,
Boy Scout leader is also a famous actor. I'm like, oh,
he's a
uh,
comedian, isn't he?
no,
Oh, I thought he was a comedian.
no, no, no. He plays Olivia Benson's therapist on Law and Order SVU.
Oh, oh,
But anyways, I was like, oh, know him. Uh, but yeah, and then so another like subtle difference is we meet Al Melvin earlier in the 2004 version. So he in the
right
2004 version,
away.
he kind of sets the events off because he is there while Bennett Marco is talking about this. And he kind of comes to him and is like, have you been having dreams about this? I've been having dreams, and they're like very weird and disturbing, and like something is going on. And Major Marco is like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have any dreams. Like,
Hmm.
I'm good. Things aren't making sense and adding up. And he's like, my memories are different. Like this story that we have, like this is not adding up. We see kind of where Raymond Shaw is in both version. So in the 1962 version, he's the stepson of a senator, and he gets they both get the Medal of Honor, Raymond Shaw. So they end up regardless of what happened. So both units got kidnapped and something happened to them, but they're all sort of fed a story of Raymond Shaw's heroics that he fought off the enemy. Like in the 2004 version, you kind of see this play out. He like gets on the gun on top of the Humvee and shoots down a bunch of helicopters with Saddam's troops in them, like single-handedly after
Right.
Bennett Marco got knocked out. And like sadly, two members of the unit were killed in both versions. We find out more about that later. So in the 1962 version, his stepfather is a senator running for re-election, and the mom is like, there are such opportunists. His
Right.
mom shows up as soon as he lands with his Medal of Honor. They have a banner over him that's like Johnny's son.
Mhm.
And I love because he's like, you're not my dad the whole time. You're not my dad. I am not his son. Uh,
I looked, by the way, just in the 1962 version, Angela Lansbury is only 3 years older than Lawrence Harvey.
of course, that's how it always happens.
So, so in, she's about 18 to 19 years older, Meryl Streep is than Liv Schreiber, character.
At
Just
least that makes more sense.
yeah, that's more plausible. But yeah, because I looked and I thought, I don't think Angela's that much older than Lawrence, if at all. I really
No.
thought he might have been older, but anyway, so I looked.
But yeah, so we get that sense. In the 2004 version, as we mentioned, he is Raymond Shaw is a congressman, and his mother, Eleanor, is a senator. In both cases, Eleanor has an idea of who she wants to be the vice presidential candidate in an upcoming election. So this guy, Governor Arthur, is going to be the presidential candidate, and she wants either her husband, Senator Johnny Iceland, in the original version, or her son Raymond Shaw to be the VP candidate.
Hmm.
Um, Senator Tom Jordan is a potential obstacle to that in both versions. In the 2004 version, he's the shoe-in to be the vice presidential candidate. In the older version, it wasn't clear that he was going to be, but they needed his support
Yeah,
to kind of put him over. And he was like, he's a rival, like generally outside of this, like does not like Shaw. Like they're very different politically.
mhm.
I think in both versions, Eleanor Shaw and Johnny Iceland are sort of more hardliners, right? It's like it's either the Red Scare or the Global War on Terror, and they're very like cracked down, more authoritarian.
Right.
Whereas Tom Jordan in both cases is a lot more kind of liberal, like let's cooperate with the world and like open, that kind of
Hmm.
vibe. So they're rivals just in general politics, but also specifically in this upcoming election.
Correct.
Early on, Marco starts having nightmares in both versions. And in both cases, he's assigned to Army intelligence, I believe.
Yeah, he still
So,
stayed in the military.
yes. So he was captain at the time of the happenings. Now, in both, he's major. So he's been promoted. And he's been in like 20 something years in both cases. So they both are having nightmares. And what we kind of find out through these nightmares, and we see some more later in the 1962 version, we haven't seen owls yet, but we see them eventually. But basically, they, the bad guys, which, as we mentioned in the 1962 version, are communists. So it's like Chinese and Russians. In 2004, it's this company, Manchurian Global. They have brainwashed this unit, this entire unit. One, they've planted this false memory, right? This story about Raymond Shaw's heroics, so that he gets the Medal of Honor, and like they come back and tell this story. And everyone like recites it like word for word, right?
Oh.
In 2004 version, it's more like the events, like the events. In the 1962 version, they say like Raymond Shaw is the nicest, kindest, friendliest, best man I've ever met. Even though it's clear from the scenes that we see, they did not like him at all. He was not, you could not describe this person as friendly.
He was a jerk.
Yeah.
The men didn't like him, and then even Marco, I think, maybe sort of felt sorry for him, but he tolerated him at best.
And even Raymond Shaw in the 62 version, he's like, I'm like not a nice person. And he explains kind of like what happened, but like, he was like, I'm like not a friendly guy.
Yeah,
so,
I'm not a I'm not a good person. Yeah, so.
so you could see that was planted. So that is planted, but also they create sleeper agents. So
Hmm.
in the original, only Raymond Shaw is a sleeper agent, and they show how they have hypnotized him. Again, his trigger is the Red Queen card when he's playing solitaire, which even can happen. He doesn't even have to be playing real solitaire. He's because in the dream he's just
Hmm.
playing like imaginary solitaire. He's moving his hands, but there's no cards. But once he sees the Queen of Diamonds, he'll do whatever they say, and he kills the two members of the unit that were killed. Were not killed in like a firefight. They were killed by him. One strangled with a scarf,
Hmm.
and one shot in the head. In the 2004 version, they create two sleeper agents. It's both Raymond Shaw and Bennett Marco. And so Shaw kills the one guy by strangling. He kills Anthony Mackie
It kills Anthony
um,
Mackie. I know.
by strangling, and Marco kills the other guy, Pablo Schreiber, by shooting him in the head. It would have been
Shooting.
interesting if they had Liev Schreiber kill Pablo Schreiber, but
I
yeah.
know. I wondered about that. Like after I
I've
saw the
always
movie, because
wanted
I
to strangle my younger brother. Here we go.
right, yeah,
Uh,
or shoot him,
yeah,
but get you get your pick. So
right. I'm exercising some real feelings here. But in any case, so we get a sense of like this is what happened, right? They've been brainwashed, and this guy is a an agent, or these guys are
right,
sleeper agents. And Bennett Marco at this point is like, oh shit, I don't. It's like something is going on here, right? Because we see like in the 2004 version, like Raymond Shaw, Eleanor has pulled strings, and somehow he is now the VP nominee. I did kind of love that scene. I did love Meryl in this, just being awful. Like she goes into this room and all these other senators and Congress people are meeting, and they're like, Tom Jordan is the VP candidate. And she's like, I will straight up destroy you. You think you can win without me, and you cannot. And then, boom, her son is the VP candidate.
yeah, I like it because and the guy I was talking about, like it was in with the Madam President or Madam
Hmm.
Secretary and stuff, and because he says, "Oh, this is a done deal," this is there's no ifs, ands, or buts. And
Yes.
then it's like after she goes off on her tirade, he goes, "Give us a few minutes," and then the next thing you know, they're announcing,
Hmm.
Raymond as as the VP candidate for the
Yep.
ticket. So yeah,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
she knows how to play the game with the old boys club.
Yes.
And I kind
Yes.
of get the feeling, I don't know that I don't know how truthful it is, that that's probably how things happen.
Probably. Yeah. I have to
That's how
imagine.
deals get done, and that's how nominations get made. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but
And both Marcos try to bring this up to their superiors in the army, and they're all like, "Are you taking your meds?
yeah, it,
You crazy?"
and in the 2004 version, as
He kind of is.
yeah, I think you need to go to the VA.
Yeah.
You know?
They say he has Gulf War syndrome, and he
hmm
is apparently on meds that he may
Yeah,
or may not be taking. And
and
they're
he
like,
has PTSD and Gulf War syndrome,
yeah,
and
and he had a concussion
right,
because he got
and
knocked on the
everything
head.
else, right, everything
So
else under the
yeah,
sun.
things are not doing great. And we get some scenes of Raymond in both of them. Uh in the 1962 version, also, then we see the other guy, Al Franklin, is having his dreams, and he writes a letter to Raymond Shaw. And Ray reads the letter, and then he gets a call that tells him to play solitaire. And when he gets to the Queen of Diamonds, they tell him that he has to meet them somewhere next week.
hmm
In the 2004 version, all this information kind of comes eventually in both of the movies, but like we see Raymond with Jocelyn Jordan, who is in both versions kind of the one who got away. It's like a person that he was in love with, but the mom sabotaged the relationship, and then he joined the military immediately and never saw her. So he sees her a little bit earlier on in the 2004 version because they're at a like kind of campaigning,
hmm
and she's there, and Marco is trying to talk to him, but he's like, I can't talk to you right now, man. Well, at first he says he wants to talk to him later, but then Marco tries to talk to him as he's trying to talk to Jocelyn, and he's like, I can't talk to you right now, man. This is the one that got away. But then we see how Raymond Shaw in the 2004 version gets uh activated. So he goes into his hotel suite, and it's the phone's ringing, and he picks it up, and they activate him. They go like, "Is this Raymond Shaw? Raymond Shaw? Raymond Prentice Shaw?
Shaw.
Like whatever his rank was, Raymond Prentice Shaw." And then
Oh,
you can
Sergeant. Yeah.
Sergeant Sergeant Raymond Shaw, and then you can see him kind of. They change the sound in it.
What that and I like how they did the lighting effect. It's like
Yeah.
everything all of a sudden becomes brighter. It's like
Yes.
it's and
It's
he
like
gets
sort of like a
this
white light on everything.
yeah, and he gets this happy look on his face. Like, like he's
Hmm.
oh, this is good. This is
Yeah.
yeah, he doesn't look like his usual sourpuss self.
And you get this sort of like background kind of like high pitched like humming noise almost. And they take him basically like through a closet in the hotel room, and there's a secret little laboratory.
I was
Uh
good.
right
Man,
there.
I said, man, this is like, this is a little much, isn't it?
It
That
is.
they've got a surgical suite set up, and
Yeah. And that's where also in the 1962 version, Raymond Shaw shows up and the the communists have set up a little area for them to check on him too. Basically, both the communists and Manchurian Global want to check on their asset,
right.
see how
Well,
things are going.
in the first one, they sort of fake, I guess, a
Yeah.
car accident, and oh, he has to be taken to a convalescence.
Yes. And they set him up like they're in an apartment and they set him up like in traction in slings with bandages on. Like he's fine, but just in case someone were to walk in, they could
Right.
see that. So, and Dr. Lowe is there. He's flown over secretly to work on him. And there's like a local Russian agent there who's kind of the contact. Again, in the 2004 version, secretly behind a hotel closet is an entire surgical suite because they put a new like chip in him in his
Yeah.
brain. They drill into his brain to put a new chip in, which is good because the other one gets bit out later by Denzel Washington.
That's an intense scene.
It really is. But yeah, so they need a test. In the 1962 version, they want to test him because it's not as precise as a chip implanted. So they have him kill someone. They have him kill his boss at the newspaper because he's working for a newspaper where the boss hates his stepfather because that's not my dad. He's rebelling. We don't see it happen, but we learn later he did kill his he we
Hmm.
see him go there
Yeah.
to the office and the boss is like, why are you here? And he kills him. Marco in both movies kind of gets the army is like, you are acting straight up crazy. You need to like step away.
Mhm.
Because he's getting to the point of like kind of harassing Raymond Shaw. And they're like, you would like have to chill. So he gets put on sick leave in both. Um, and then he decides to go up to New York, get on the train, and you can see in both he's not doing well. In the 1962 version, he sees like a picture of a Chinese person and is like, "Oh God."
Well,
Um,
he can't light his cigarette, and he spills it.
sweating,
Oh,
sweating.
profusely, and then his cigarette drops into his drink. There's a lot of smoking going on in the first one too.
Oh my
So
God, constantly, constantly. It's
yeah,
the 60s.
it
So,
is.
well, it was the
So
50s in the movie, but yeah, everybody was
right,
just smoking like a damn chimney.
even Janet was, because
Yep.
and Janet has a very big, ornate, fancy lighter that she comes out and, like this is her coming to Frank's rescue. I like that after he runs off and she goes after him on the
Mm-hmm.
train and lights his cigarette for him, and then they're out there enjoying a
Mm-hmm.
smoke
Yes.
because that's
Yes.
what you did back then.
Of course, of course. I will also say before Marco in the 2004 version, before he goes to New York, he tries to go see Al.
Hmm.
It's Al Melvin. I said Al Franklin before. It's Al Melvin. He tries to go see him, but he's not in his apartment. He breaks in, and it's the
Oh,
apartment of like a person who has lost it because there's like drawings and writings like covering the walls
yeah.
because he's like really spiraling because he's like obviously having these dreams and like doubting his reality. Um, they when he goes up to New York, he has a similar experience on the train. Like he keeps thinking he's seeing the British guide.
Hmm.
And so he like has a freak out. And in both cases, this is where we meet Eugenie, who goes by Rosie because it's her middle name and she likes it better. Um, in well, for in the 2004 version, she says she's the lady at the grocery store.
I
So she
know
remembers
it.
him from the grocery store. I also
Right.
love the detail that she says romance novels. He buys romance novels at the grocery store.
And ramen noodles
You do see him eating ramen noodles a lot,
well, because later
constantly.
on we see why, because
Yes.
yeah. But
He was
anyway,
eating ramen noodles when he was being brainwashed.
right,
So it's like,
exactly. I guess that's
obviously, he
what
has like a subconscious connection to ramen noodles.
ramen noodles. Yeah. So.
He was eating ramen noodles when he like got up to shoot the guy. They're like, "Can you put down your ramen noodles and shoot this
Hmm.
man in the head?" And he's like,
Hmm.
"Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Sure. Hmm.
Let me just put him down for a second." In both cases, he ends up getting arrested. I will say in 2004, Before he gets arrested, he finds a chip in his back and cuts it out. But Rosie like comes into the bathroom because she hears it, like if you're cutting into your skin, you're like ah, and she hears him and she's like, "Are you okay?" And she startles him and he drops it down the drain, which is like crap.
I know.
In the 1962 version, Shaw has hired Shunjin, the guide, the fake guide from Korea, as his valet and cook. He doesn't seem to like recognize him, but of course the brainwashing I think has probably. But
Right.
he also says he's like, "Oh, I knew you. I
Yeah,
helped
because
you in Korea."
he says, "Oh, I was your interpreter, I was your guide,
Mhm.
or whatever." Yeah, while you were in Korea, and then, but I guess
Yes.
they were brainwashed to forget, like, he was the
Hmm.
one that suckered him into the ambush.
Yeah. Also, he says like, "Oh, your father, Senator Inchin, like told me to come here." He's like, "That's he's not my dad." When Marco goes to Shaw's to see him, and he sees this guy, and he's like, he remembers him, so he
Hmm.
immediately starts to beat the shit out of him.
Oh, it's on. Yeah,
It is a fight.
and
There's a
Frank
little
goes
bit
into
of
full karate mode.
right. He's karate chopping desks and stuff. I was like, what the hell is this? I,
I
I actually
know.
wrote not this karate bullshit in my notes. In the 2004 version, uh, Marco does go talk to Raymond Shaw, and he is trying to be like, "Have you had these dreams?" And like Raymond is a little bit all over the place. He's giving like conflicting it. He's like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." And then he's like, "Oh yeah, like there's some like weird stuff." And but
Mm,
he's like kind of going back and forth. And he starts being like kind of obnoxious. Like it feels like he's like taunting Marco a little bit. And then
right.
Marco was like goes after him because he's like, "You got a chip too." And he like attacks him and uses his mouth to bite the chip out of his back. In both cases, Bennett Marco goes to jail. In the 1962 version, Rosie bails him out after dumping her fiance. She dumped her fiance and then she was like, and then I got the call from the police station. And she goes to bail him out, which again, if this was nowadays and I met someone on a train who seemed a little unstable and then the next call I got was from the police, I would be like, "Oh, that's a red flag." I would say I don't know him.
Are you trying to tell me that if you met Frank Sinatra on a train, who was maybe just a little bit out of it,
A
and
little bit.
well, okay,
We have to put it in terms that like I would appreciate. If I met Chris Evans on the train
there you go.
and he was because I'm like Frank Sinatra doesn't do much for me, and he was sweating profusely and kind of being weird, and then I got a call to bail him out of jail.
Come on now, come
I
clean.
I don't think that I would do it.
You don't really? You don't think you would do it?
I don't think so. First of all, I'm very cheap. I don't like to part with money.
I get you. I understand, but I'm just okay.
And I'd be like, this man
I'm
is
not doubting you.
crazy.
But I'm just okay. I was just trying to.
You know my line of work.
I know. I know.
Looking for red flags is my job. In the 2004 version, actually, like the Shaws have him released
Hmm.
because Raymond doesn't want to press charges. He's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's my captain. Like,
Right. He's a good guy.
he's a good guy. He's just
Yeah.
obviously going through something. He's very ill."
Right. And if I can if I can keep him from going to jail or whatever,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna push him over the edge.
Yes. In the 1962 version, this is when actually he's able to talk to Marco. When
Hmm.
Marco's able to talk to Shaw after he gets out of jail, because obviously he was trying to see him and then
Yeah.
couldn't. But Shaw, this is when he learns about Al Melvin had the same nightmare. So he's like, okay, it's not just me. And he goes back to Washington, and now they believe him because they show him a bunch of random pictures, and they're like, do you recognize anybody here? And he identifies two communist leaders. And Al Melvin, who is in Alaska, has identified the exact same two communist leaders. And like he could tell him like this is where he was sitting, this is what he was wearing, this is who he was with in the
Right.
dream.
Right. And
Which
what his entourage looked like
yes.
like one guy wasn't in uniform, but his staff was, and then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
then one was Russian, one was
Chinese.
Chinese or whatever. So
Yeah,
or
I think they said they were Chinese.
yeah.
But yeah, so they believe him. They're like, okay, now we're starting a joint intelligence task force. You were on it, and your assignment is Raymond Shaw, so you go back to New York. In the 2004 version, Marco has a friend, a Bosnian guy who had done some work in this arena named Delp. He at some point he like worked for the army slash Manchurian Global, like doing these kinds of
Yeah,
experiments.
yeah,
You
he
see
was
his like lab is full of like monkeys
with the little
with
things on their
little brain
heads.
caps on. I'm like, oh my
Yes,
God, the
I
poor
know.
monkeys. Um,
I'd have
and
felt
at
better if he
first,
had people sitting in there,
right.
you
And at
know?
first, Dell did not believe him. But then when he
Oh,
comes back, because he has Denzel is on it, Bennett Marco. He has kept the entire time he was in jail. He had the little chip he bit out of Raymond Shaw in his mouth, and he kept it there.
the little
And so,
implant thingy.
yeah, he brings it to Del, who's like, I don't know if you really want to know what's going on here.
Yeah, because he says, I don't want to know what this
I don't want to know
is.
what this is because he basically like at some point they developed this technology initially to help with like health stuff. They can easily if they like find your body on the battlefield, they know they can figure out who you are.
Right.
Right? It's to like save you, to identify
It's your
people.
medical data
It's your
and
medical
stuff.
data, all of this stuff. But Manchurian Global was doing some more evilish kind of
Mm,
stuff, more deep shit with this sort of technology. And so he wants to help, he agrees to help Marco like fully kind of recover this memory of what happened to him by doing electroconvulsive therapy to like shock this memory out of him basically. And that's where we see kind of the full thing.
right.
Because his dream was more flashes, whereas
Yeah.
in the earlier version the dreams were kind of like the full narrative.
Well, really, because
um
yeah, it played out like the whole scene, and
yeah.
then we saw, Melvin's version of it, which I thought was interesting too, because it showed that each one saw something a little bit different. Like Melvin's dream, most of the people in the room were black,
Hmm.
as opposed to old white women that were in.
Yes. Oh, that's the other thing too. They were hypnotized to believe they were at like a women's like garden meeting.
Right,
So
yeah,
like it was all men there doing this, but they saw them as women. And like you said, for Melvin, it was like all older black women, and for Bennett Marco, it was white women.
older white women, yeah, and it
Hmm.
was, and they called the ma'am, or
Yes.
yeah, and the guy, and one of the lines though from the with Delp and Denzel's character Marco was struck me was when he asked Denzel, he said, "How do you know that this isn't the dream and you're actually still in Kuwait?"
It's like the Matrix.
Exactly. But that was kind of, I just thought that was kind of chilling, when you think about that, and you wonder about some of the people who suffer from some of those things, is,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I think that in the 2004 version, the conspiracy felt like bigger.
hmm
You know, it felt like it's just like, oh, I can't trust anything. Whereas in the 1962 version, the like the army got on board a
right
lot more
away. Exactly.
quickly.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, he didn't like Bennett Marco didn't have to like doubt himself in that one. Like he was a lot more clear. Whereas in the
hmm
2004 version, it's just like, oh, like what is going on? Like, can I trust anyone? Can I trust myself? Like,
Yeah.
it felt a little more like all encompassing. So, um, a couple of different things. So in the 1962 version, Shaw Shaw's drunk. It's Christmas Eve. We could this could be another Christmas movie. Shaw is telling Marco about how horrible his mother is, and as an example, how she broke up him and Jocelyn. And we get a whole flashback about how Jocelyn saved him when he'd been bit by a poisonous snake in like New York or what which I don't like
Wherever.
think is like I think of like the Southwest as like the home of I get there are poisonous snakes everywhere, I guess, but like you know what I mean? Anyways,
I
she
get you.
saved him and he was like, "Can I marry you immediately?" And in the flashback, he told his mom, and his mom laughed at him and was like, absolutely not. And basically, she either wrote a letter or made him write a letter to break up with Jocelyn. And
Hmm.
the same sort of similar thing happened in the 2004 version. We just don't see it in
Right.
flashback. Uh but yeah, and that is some really good Angela Lansbury work though. In that
Hmm.
when she's like, Jordan is like everything that we're against. He is evil. He is a communist. How could you even consider doing this to me?
Hmm.
She's just like so evil. And then Shaw accidentally gets triggered in the 1962 version. He's at a bar waiting for Marco and starts playing solitaire. And Marco kind of comes in, he's like sort of sees the Queen of Diamonds as Marco's there. And Marco's what's up with you, dude? Like, because he goes into his like trance and he hears like the bartender's just telling a story, like, and I told this guy, why don't you get in a cab and go to Central Park and jump in the lake? Which to hypnotize Raymond Shaw, he's like, all right, and just like leaves. And Marco's like, what the hell are you doing, dude? And just goes after him.
I know it's yeah. He's like, and he goes out there and he's like, he 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 goes and jumps in there, jumps in the lake, just
Yeah.
walks right out there. So,
And Marco's like, what are you doing? And he like doesn't remember.
hmm,
Because that's how it works. He doesn't remember what happened. He's like, why am I wet? He's like, you just walked into the lake.
yeah. He goes, Ben, what are you doing here? Why am I here? It's like,
Right. And then but he that allows Ben and Marco to figure out what the trigger is. He's
hmm,
like, okay. So he started playing solitaire and that's what triggered it. And then he sort of they figure out him and the army psychiatrist. The army psychiatrist is like, okay, it must be a face card because like those are like more representative of people and like and then he's like, okay, oh, I saw like a queen of diamonds, so it must be the queen of diamonds. So they kind of figure it out. In the 2004 version, this is when Marco finds out that Rosie is a Fed.
mm,
Well, he finds out a little bit later, but he finds out that he's very paranoid, right? And
right.
he realizes he's been surveilled. He dumps out her bag and she has a whole baggie of tapes
The little
with
micro cassette
little micro
tapes.
cassettes labeled with his name. So he goes to the library. Shout out to libraries. Many good resources at this library because he can borrow a tape player and do some internet research. So
Hmm.
support your local public libraries, everyone. Wealth of
Isn't
information.
it the New
Jim,
York Public Library?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Stop defunding it, Eric Adams. But he plays the tapes, and it's just she's recorded their conversations. So he's like, this is weird. But
Hmm.
again, it's like all encompass. It's like, oh, I can't trust anybody. Everyone's after me. But he does some research on Manchurian Global because that's what Delp had told him about. And he's like writing stuff down on his hand because he like doesn't trust his memory. Because after that electroshock therapy, he woke up like in the park
Yeah. And
days
well, Rosie
later.
was with him, and because and
Yeah.
she said, "Oh, he would say he's your friend said that this would happen. It'd be like rebooting a computer."
Yeah. And then he like didn't know what day it was. Like he was like, and I was in the park on Monday. And she's like, no, that was Wednesday. And today's Friday. So he was like very out of it. But thankfully his hand still said Manchurian Global. So he's looking them up and he finds a doctor. And this is the doctor that we saw greet Raymond in the hotel room closet operating suite.
With the
Uh, his
drill
name
bit.
is, yes, drilling into his head. Dr. Atticus Noy, who is a South African geneticist who is actually wanted by the International Criminal Court because he was doing illegal experiments on people in apartheid South Africa. So he's a villain on many levels. He's like a villainous villain. And then he compiles all of this information and he decides to take it to Senator Jordan because he's like, okay, this person will be this where he's like Senator Jordan is more of like a peace. He's skeptical of like the military and
Hmm.
defense contractors. Also, he's skeptical of the Shaws, obviously. So he's like, maybe this will be a good place to start. And he has some power to do
Right.
something with this. And Jordan does at first seem like you are cuckoo crazy, but then when he's like reading it, like things are putting together. And I think he says something like, so all you have is like conjecture and like these dots you've connected. And he's like, well, I didn't realize any of this before, so I'm
Yeah.
actually doing a lot better.
Yeah.
Conjecture and like some dots I put together is like a lot of progress for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. He said it started out with my dreams. He goes,
Yes,
this is a big leap forward.
exactly. So, and then Senator Jordan, and this part I was like, why why is this what you would do? This did not seem like the best next step to me.
I wrote that down. I thought, why would you do this?
He takes it to the Shaws and
Yeah.
like confronts them. And maybe this is like maybe this is some of that like political backroom kind of thing. Like if you find out something about a colleague, you go to them first. But if it's that your colleague is doing like a conspiracy, maybe you don't discuss it with them. Maybe you take it to like the FBI or something. Like there has to be like a better, I don't know, go to like the OIG of something. I like it just doesn't feel
Somebody.
like if someone told me that like I don't know, if someone was like Jim is involved in a conspiracy and brainwashing people, I wouldn't necessarily go straight to you. I would go to like someone else who could maybe verify it. Because if I go straight to you, then you're gonna be like, "Oh, now you know my plan. I'm gonna kill you." Because that's what
Yeah.
happens,
And I always liked you.
right? Like, oh, now I gotta kill you.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, Jordan takes us to both the Shaws, Eleanor and Raymond, and they're like, well, Metamarco is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, so like, bye.
Right.
But when Jordan leaves, Raymond is like, I have been having these kind of dreams, Mom. And actually, before Jordan leaves, they're like, what do you want us to do? And he's like, you should step down, Raymond Shaw, and you need to submit yourself for testing. Because, like,
Mhm.
if this is true, like, there's something going on with you.
Right.
And Eleanor is like, I do not believe that Manchurian Global will be doing this. And if you're wrong, I am going to bring this up on the floor of the United States Senate, and you will be censured, and I will bury you.
Mm. Another
Very
good,
threatening.
yeah, another good, strong baddie role played by Meryl.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because this is like evil in a different way. Like I always think of her evil as like Miranda Priestley, but this is like true, true evil.
Hmm.
That's like bitchy. This is evil.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. This is like, yeah, I'll choke the living crap out of you. So.
yes. And then so actually in both movies at this point, Mama Shaw, Eleanor, we learn that she knew about this
Hmm.
and she triggers the mind control for Raymond in both movies. So in the 1962 version, she's thrown a party and invited the Jordans and had him come. Like, hey, don't you want to see Jocelyn again? And
Hmm.
what a coincidence. It's a costume party. And what costume is Jocelyn wearing? But the Queen of Diamonds. She's wearing like a giant card. It's the Queen of Diamonds. She's like one of the cards in like Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Um, so he gets triggered. And in the 2004 version, she says the words and triggers him. And in both, she says, you are going to kill Senator Tom Jordan. Now, in the 1962 version, he does get a little bit of time with Jocelyn to like reconcile, and it seems like
Well,
they get
well,
married.
they get married. They said
Yeah.
they flew up to Maryland. Yeah, that
Hmm.
they left the party, got married because I guess that he saw her in the Red Queen thing, and then now all of a sudden she probably said something. We ought to get married, and then
Hmm.
bingo. Okay, let's go get married.
But he's very happy because he wanted to marry her anyway.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah. So.
but yeah, so in both cases, he goes and kills Tom Jordan. In the 1962 version, he shoots him right through his milk.
I wrote this was a tough scene for me
Yeah,
because
because he kind of like walks in very zombified, and like Tom Jordan like knows him and trusts him. He's like, "Oh,
it,
you're my son-in-law now."
oh yeah, welcome to the family. He's happy
Hmm.
because he it's not him he has a grudge against, it's his mother.
Yeah, and Raymond Shaw also doesn't like his mother, so they're like, "Great, we agree. She
Right,
sucks."
exactly. So, but yeah, yeah. I wrote that this was hard to watch. Not
Hmm.
and well for what
I think
happens
both of
next.
them, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
in the 2004 version, Um, Tom Jordan is an avid kayaker because he lives in Maryland by the bay, and like you do. So he goes out and kayaks, and I guess they were trying to parallel like the water scene in the 1962 version.
Oh, okay.
So in 2004, one Raymond Shaw just wades into the water and like flips him over, and he drowns him. He drowns Tom Jordan, and unfortunately, in both cases, Jocelyn enters.
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Because obviously in the first one she hears gunshots. And in the second one, she can see that like her dad has like capsized.
Right.
The kayak's flipped
And
over.
and I don't know if she knows it's Raymond
No, but she
out there in the
sees like
water, but
someone out
some
there
guy,
and
yeah.
yeah.
And
So she runs out there. And in both cases she does eventually. She's like, "Raymond?"
yeah.
And in the 1962 version, he turns around and just bang bang shoots her. Just because again, he's
Yeah.
just like blank. He's like a robot.
I know.
And just like immediately turns around and just shoots her. And then in the 2004 version, he drowns her. And that's like hard to watch too, because
oh
you see her like
but
she's struggling and like
oh
he's just
and
holding her under the water.
that's a great scene too,
And
because
it's
she
just like
just
all on her
goes,
face because you could just see, yeah,
mm-hmm.
her face under the water. So yeah, it's bad. And in both cases, Marco finds out about the murders and he's like, something has
He
happened.
he
Because in,
knows
yeah,
well, yeah, he
in
doesn't know, no,
1962,
but
he
he
knows it was Raymond. He's like, it was
right,
Raymond.
yeah, it was
Because like
Raymond.
it's reported on the front page that like they were
Mm,
killed. But
yeah,
he's like, I know it was Raymond. And in the 2004 version, it's reported as an accident, like they both drowned,
right.
like that he drowned and she was trying to save him and drowned. Um, but Marco knows something's up. He actually confronts Rosie about it because
Mhm.
he at this point doesn't know. And he this scene is like it's bad, but it gets a little bit funny because he's choking her and he's like, "Tell me what you know," and she pulls out a gun and she's like, "Let go of me." She pulls out her Fed issue Glock and is like,
Right.
"Click, let go of me."
Exactly.
And
So,
she explains, he's like, "I'm gonna tell the feds." She's like, "I am the feds."
yeah. And even
So
then, you really don't know. I didn't know at that point, was she in on it,
right.
or was she on it? You know what
Right.
right.
Because, like, are the feds trying to, like, suppress him or are they trying
Exactly.
to help him? But eventually she
Because
does say, like, we found an implant in Al Melvin. Because also, like, the, e-
2004,
everyone in their unit has died of, like, quote unquote, like, natural causes.
one guy
Or,
got
like,
cancer.
yeah, cancer. One
One
guy
guy
died in
killed
9/11.
himself.
One guy killed himself, like car accident. It's like not like natural causes, but like normal
Right. Or
ways to
what would seem
die.
to be normal. But yeah, but the only ones left alive were uh, Ben
Melvin. Yeah.
and Melvin, and then Shaw.
Yeah. And Melvin
And
washed up in
in
the
the
Potomac.
poem, yeah, and they say suicide.
Yes. And they kind of when they had Ben in jail in New York in the 2004
Hmm.
version, they do seem to accuse him a
Right.
little bit that he did
Because
it because he had been
right,
at Melvin's apartment.
right,
He's
exactly.
like, I was trying to go see him and he wasn't there.
Yeah.
We get to the point now where Bennett Marco, in both movies kind of makes a last ditch effort to like get through to Raymond Shaw because he's kind of figured out what's going on. We also know too that like both the moms are aware that her son was brainwashed and Eleanor in the 1962 version was like, I wanted them to send me a brainwashed assassin. They did not tell me. It wasn't supposed to be you. So
Right.
that's something that she kind of wants to get revenge for. In the 2004 version, she's like arguing with the Manchurian global guys. They're like, you went rogue having your son kill Jordan. You can't just like do that. And she's like, you were supposed to like hypnotize him or whatever, but not he's having these dreams, he's having all these other effects. Like that was not supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to like mess him up. Which
Right.
like I don't know what she expected, but like so, both moms kind of did create Raymond in this way, but it didn't go the way that she expected. But yeah, Marco tries in both movies kind of one last ditch effort. So in the 1962 version, Raymond actually calls Marco and says like I'm going crazy, I need help. And Marco brings a deck of cards that is all 52 queens of diamonds. And he's
Yeah.
trying to deprogram him. First he kind of gets him to like tell him everything. Everything he's done, like everything kind of he knows. That's the background. So he admits to like killing his boss, he killed the Jordans, like he killed the two guys in the unit, et cetera, et cetera. He learns that Eleanor Shaw is his American operator, which we've
Hmm.
kind of seen happen. And he's supposed to. She calls him and she wants him to come to the party convention because this is obviously when they announce the nominees for president and vice president.
Oh, yeah, because at this point he still doesn't know. Shaw doesn't know what he's supposed to do.
Yes,
He,
yeah,
he's not aware of what the end game is.
yes. But Marco's like, as soon as you find out, you call me because I got hundreds of men. I can have thousands of men, and we'll be there and we'll help you. So he's kind of trying to deprogram him. So he
Hmm.
he keeps showing him the queens of diamonds, and like as he's saying this to sort of let him know. In the 2004 version, Rosie arranges a meeting between Shaw and Marco on election day. Because he's already the VP nominee. There in the 2004 version, the convention was at the beginning,
Hmm.
and now it's election day. So he goes. They do the whole thing where they follow the candidates when they go to vote, even though he does not vote. He like goes in the booth, finds a note from Rosie, and goes. Also, an aside, why was there school at this school on election day? Schools
I
are closed on election day
I know. I was getting,
for this reason. There's like
we
kids in the way
I, they're putting on a school play.
in the middle of election day. Like this is not what's supposed to happen. But anyways, Rosie basically Raymond Shaw is led into a room and Marco is there with his file and Shaw says, I have been having the dreams. And Marco's like, Ben is like, let me help you. And
Hmm.
and Shaw at this point he's like, I'm already gone and I want you to have this. And he gives Ben his Medal of Honor.
Hmm.
And Ben's like, oh, Shaw asked Ben, like, did I kill Jocelyn and
Hmm.
Tom Jordan? And Ben's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you did.
Yeah.
And Ben's like, like, we can take them down. Like, we can stop whatever is happening. And Shaw's like, no, man, they have it all figured out. Like, it's a whole thing. They're already two steps ahead. And as evidence of that, his phone rings.
Yeah.
And it is his mother, Eleanor Shaw. And she says, let me talk to Ben. And this is where we find out that Ben is also susceptible to the trigger words. He's also a sleeper agent. Because she says, like, Bennett Marco, Captain Bennett, whatever middle name Marco,
Ignatius, wasn't it? Was it
something
something
like
odd like
that.
that? Yeah, some sort of
Yeah.
odd name.
But yeah, so he's activated. And then when Rosie goes back in to find them, Marco is gone.
Yeah.
And Shaw has left too, but Shaw, you see him leave. This is where the mom reveals the plot in both
Hmm.
movies. So in the 1962 version, he is going to be the shooter and he's going to shoot the presidential nominee so that his stepfather, Johnny, can ascend to be the presidential nominee. And then they'll have power and they're going to essentially, she said, like, we'll have so much power that martial law will look like anarchy. So they're about to like be full on like dictators, like
Yeah.
totalitarian
Sounds like it. Yeah.
fascists. Like it's bad. But he's going to be dressed up as a priest. The communists have sent a Soviet sniper rifle. It's in a bag. You're going to go up to this like lighting booth, and as soon as he says these words in his speech, you're going to shoot him in the head. And then she has this whole plan where like Johnny's going to pick him up and
Oh,
be like, "Oh no, like what? Like he's friggin' like I don't know, like
and
Mary holding Jesus, like."
and people are going to take the body away from him,
And
but
he'll
after
be,
he fights them off, for a
no, don't
minute.
take the body. He'll be covered in blood, and then he's gonna give a speech about how he's gonna stand up for America, and like
Oh
people are gonna
yeah.
love them. And again, this is when she says like she's gonna also get revenge on the communists for making her son the assassin because that's
Yeah.
not what she wanted.
Oh, just had a thought too. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
By the way, Angela Lansbury does a much better job with an American accent than Lawrence Harvey does.
She certainly does. Yes,
Because Angela is from England as well. So just
indeed,
saying.
indeed.
Yeah.
In the 2004 version, we first see Shaw's Secret Service guy places a bag in an air vent and then screws the
Hmm.
cover back on. And this part, I'm like, this is a little weird because Meryl Streep's Eleanor Shaw is like bathing her adult son or like drying him off after a bath. I'm like, this is a little Freudian for
It's a
me.
little. I was going to ask you, did you get the impression,
Well, because
maybe not
then,
so much in the first movie, but in the later movie, there's a little bit of a Oedipus
oh yeah, because after she gives this whole speech, she like leans in to like kiss him
kiss him.
romantically.
Hmm.
I was like, what is happening here?
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, because she does feel like she does talk about like his father, her husband was like supposed to be the one to like ascend to power, and he like couldn't do it or like
Right.
wasn't willing to do it, and he's gonna do it. So it is like she is viewing him as like a fill-in for like her
Yeah.
husband a little bit, which is weird,
But yeah,
but it's not like she's a good person. So
because they sort of cut away, from the second movie from that, as that sort of scene plays out, then they cut away and go to something else. So.
yeah. So, but she tells him the plan. So in this one, the plan is that Ben Marco is going to be the shooter. And he's gonna, as soon as like they're announced as the winners, the new president, Arthur, steps forward. Ben's gonna shoot him in the head, and then Shaw will be president. Now, this
Hmm.
is where I was like, I don't know all the rules of ascension. Wouldn't it make more sense to wait until he's inaugurated? But that's just me.
Right. I get you.
Um, but anyways, because I feel like this would just create confusion, and doing it after they're inaugurated would like make the succession more clear. But
Hmm.
no one consulted me. So, and then he's like, "What will happen to Ben?" And she's like, "The shooter will die.
Hmm.
That's what the people need for healing."
Yes.
And she let him be brainwashed so that this would happen, so that he could ascend to power. But she's like, she does say all this to him in like a, well, honey, Ben is gonna shoot this guy in the head,
Yeah.
and I need you to be very still so you don't get shot. Okay? You stand right on your mark, and then you're gonna be the president. Like she's telling like a child a bedtime story.
Yeah. Like, and this is how all this is going to play out.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if you're a good boy, you'll be president.
Mm-hmm. And so in both cases, the shooters are in position. So Raymond Shaw in 1962 and Bennett Marco in 2004. And the person who knows what's happening is trying to stop them. So in the 1962 version, it's Bennett Marco is trying to stop Raymond Shaw, and
Hmm.
in the 2004 version, it's Rosie,
Hmm.
the Fed, is trying to stop him. But in both cases, the brainwashing, they get a little flicker. And I think for both Raymond Shaw's, I think the implication is that killing Jocelyn is something that kind of shook them loose a little bit.
Yeah. Someone they really cared about.
They killed the love of their life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a similar thing in both. In the 1962 version, he shoots instead of the President Arthur, he shoots his mother and stepfather
Hmm.
directly as they're sitting kind of off to the side. And in the 2004 version, Raymond Shaw deliberately he moves so that he blocks um, the president, and then he pulls up his mother to dance with her, and he kind of looks at Ben and gives him a nod and positions them so that Ben can take a shot kind of through him into his mother so that they'll both die.
Hmm.
And he does. And the people trying to stop them, so Bennett Marco in 62 and Rosie in '04, get there just a bit too late after the shot is taken. In 1962, Raymond then kills himself. He said, I didn't call you because I needed to stop them.
Yeah.
And then he kills himself. And then Marco is later trying to make sense of it. He's talking to Rosie. He's reading a book of like citations of other Medal of Honor winners. And then he talks about like what happened to Raymond Shaw. And he's like, like this just it just doesn't like make sense, right? Like these
Yeah.
acts of heroism and like he did something heroic, but he was also like he did awful things, but like it wasn't him, and like, trying to make sense of all of that. In the 2004 version, Marco is about to kill himself when Rosie arrives, but she wounds him to stop him. First of all, she shoots him in the chest. She shoots him in the
Well,
left upper chest. It's like, it's a little, I'm just saying, if you're trying to just wound him, it
I
was a little close to the heart for me.
I get you. So
That's superior vena cava. That's like there's big vessels there. I'm just saying.
I know. I'm just
She was a little close to the heart for like
Also,
it
why didn't
wasn't
she shoot him in the right shoulder? Because he was right-handed. He had the gun in the right hand.
right.
So if you're going to shoot him in the arm that's holding the gun. Unless she
Right?
was afraid it was going to go off when she shot him. I don't know.
Right. It was just weird. I was just like, that was a little bit because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I knew
Mm-hmm.
she was gonna wound him, but I was like, girl, that was a little close.
See, I didn't think she. I thought. I really thought it'd have been more impactful if she would have killed him. That's just my
That's
feeling.
true. That's true. So in the 2004 version, he's not dead. So they end up framing a Manchurian global person who had been potentially presumed dead. He'd like been in a car accident and been missing since then.
Right.
But their whole conspiracy gets kind of blown up. The British guide gets arrested. The feds have edited security footage to make it look like the Manchurian Global guy came in. They edited Ben out of the
That was pretty
security
clever. I
footage.
thought how they showed that, where
It
they
was, yeah. I was like, look at
scrubbed
this
Denzel's image, and then they.
2004
I
technology.
know, yeah, little CGI, little AI.
So, and like the Manchurian Global leadership is watching this all unfold on the news, and
Oh
they're
yeah,
like,
you can just tell they're crapping their pants.
we're screwed, man. We are screwed.
Oh yeah,
And the end of this one is Rosie takes, it does also end with Rosie and Ben Marco, but she takes him to the place where he was brainwashed.
yeah,
So he can walk around there. He does have his arm in a sling, so it was his arm, but I'm just saying she shot him in
and
the pec.
and
And he shaved
his
his head.
shaved his head. So
Yeah,
I guess he's getting ready for training day. I'm not sure. So
maybe. Yeah. Maybe he's getting some more a little more ECT. The last image in this one is he has Shaw's Medal of Honor and he has a picture of their unit and he puts them in the water because he talks about when they were at the place, like he has this memory of like trying to run out because we saw an image of that when he was
hmm
dreaming, like he's trying to run down the hallway and he said that he had this impulse like you get to the water because when you get to the water like you're
you
like
can get
free, you
away.
can get
Yeah,
away, yeah. So he goes to the water and puts the picture and the Medal of Honor in the water, and that's the end of that one.
yeah,
So the Manchurian Candidate, both 1962 and 2004 versions. Yeah, I think it just we were talking a little bit before this. Like, I think sometimes things feel like so crazy that like this kind of stuff doesn't feel that far-fetched.
far fetched. Yeah, I was going to use the same wording. It doesn't feel like it's that implausible, does it?
No, like yeah, like we got Elon Musk talking about his like Neuralink, right? He wants to put chips in people's brains so that they can like whatever like online shop by blinking or something like. And then there are people that think that every time you get a vaccine, someone's put a chip in you, and like it's
Exactly.
and we have various like I don't know assassinations and assassination attempts and coups and
Well, just
attempted coups.
uh, and people accusing or large global companies of, of doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't, or meddling and experimenting with some things that they shouldn't be doing, or
Hmm.
and people talked about, back in 1962, for example, if you think about it, like some of the things that we would, if you would have said, oh, you're going to carry around a little personal device and it's going to have as much information as, two rooms full of, supercomputers,
Right.
that people would have said, oh, you're crazy. But now, technology's caught up, or it maybe even surpassed where, even the 2004 version is, that's 20 years ago.
Hmm.
Look at
Yeah,
the
they were
things they
calling on
can do now.
landlines.
I said, why doesn't he have a cell phone, Marco?
Yeah. I mean,
He's
that was
calling
like
people up from a
from payphones.
payphone.
That was like early days of cell phones. So I feel like
I
everyone didn't have one yet. But I mean, like Raymond Shaw has a cell phone, but also like Raymond
and
Shaw's
Raymond's
like
was like tiny.
mhm, a
As
little
back
Nokia
back
brick.
yeah, back when they had the little the little tiny ones. But yeah, so I just, when you think about all the other things that people have talked about. The other thing is for me, a lot of it from the first one was, this was right before John Kennedy was shot and assassinated.
Hmm.
So,
And it came out around the time of like Bay of Pigs and like
yes, and there was just a lot going on back then. And I
hmm
thought it was kind of a brave story maybe to do,
hmm
at that time anyway. And then in 2004, who, I don't know what prompted them to remake it, but I think they did a very good job of it. And again, I think there's aspects of the later one that I like better than I do the first one.
I think
Um,
that sometimes in I think in both of these times that we've watched like an older movie and a remake, I do think that the remakes do have a little bit more like there's something that does feel a little bit more like rooted in real life, I
mhm,
guess.
yeah.
Like
Hmm.
they have a lot more context and like it just feels a little bit more like a slice of life versus
Yeah.
like the older ones feel like a sort of presentation of a story and both of them are, but like, you know what I mean? If that
Hmm.
makes sense.
No, it does,
Um,
because yeah, the first, the 1962 is maybe, I won't call it sanitized, but it may be a little bit untouched, like you said, of real life. Where the second one, it's more grittier, maybe, or is
Yeah,
that the
yeah, yeah.
word
I
I'm
think
looking
that's a
for?
good. Even I think of like the fights because like the
Oh,
fight in the first one is like whoa, they're like falling over
oh yeah,
and
it's
then meanwhile you have Denzel Washington just like tackling Liev Schreiber and biting him like
what, just ripping his shirt off, and
yes.
I mean, it's
Arr.
because li- not that I've been in a ton of fights. I've been in, I think, two fights in my entire lifetime, but you know, fights don't happen like they do on TV or in the movies. It's just,
Yeah.
it's like what they say, everybody has a plan until the first punch is thrown, and then,
Hmm.
then it just all goes to hell in a handbasket. So
Yes. And it hurts.
it does, it not only hurts the person you hit, it hurts you who does the hitting. So,
Yes, yes. But yeah, I think that it's interesting because both of these times were times of such, and I think maybe this applies to now, but like such like paranoia in a different
mhm,
way, right? Like earlier communism and like this looming threat, like nuclear threat of like
mm,
Russia and that everybody, you never know who's gonna a communist spy, right? They're infiltrating. There's that whole thing of like Johnny the senator is like, there are hundreds of communists within the Department of Defense. There's 154. There's 270. He eventually he asks Eleanor for a number because
right,
clearly she's the brains behind this operation, and she's like, we see a Heinz ketchup bottle, and then the next time he's talking, it's 57. So, but there was this sense, but like that worked because people were primed to feel like there's a communist around every corner
exactly.
and because Joseph McCarthy was telling them that. And in 2004, right, it's like we're reeling from the biggest attack on the homeland since Pearl Harbor, and you also never know who's a terrorist, and we're fighting against this again, like a large idea
Hmm.
versus like a specific country. And it's like who knows where this next thing could come from or who is involved in it and like whatever. And so I think that plays into it. And I think there is not exactly the same sense because there's not this like clearly defined like communism terrorism thing, but I think maybe because it's so like it's other Americans, I think is like the other thing that
Hmm.
people are primed against a little bit,
Yeah,
right? Or like immigrants, right? Like, or these kinds of people, or like lots of different groups that are maybe here versus like some foreign threat. I think it feels, and I think that maybe I'm like thinking this out as I say it, but like the social media that we have and the algorithms that are set up to sort of feed you certain information. Like it feels, it's not like brainwashing in this literal sense that are in these movies, but it is something that like you click a certain thing and then Facebook or YouTube or TikTok feed you
exactly.
these videos over and over again. And you can see that people can become completely disconnected from reality
Oh yeah.
because of this information that they're being fed. And it creates like a feedback loop and these like islands, right? Like you can turn on two different news channels and it's like you're on a different planet.
It really is. And they could be reporting the same
The same
story,
event.
the
Yeah.
same event, but how they present it and how they
Right.
come at it. Yeah. So,
And just the way that like our information ecosystem is set up, it almost does feel this way. Like, we can't like show someone a queen of diamonds to get them to act, but there are like things that you can say to people or show to people that will set them off
oh yeah, we'll
in
trigger them.
such a way,
Hmm.
right? Like, I don't know. The thing is coming on January 6th, think about January 6th, right? Like this idea that like the election was stolen and like this is your whoever they are trying to
You're
take your country,
right.
right? And that
Whoever
like
you are or they are, it
yes.
all depends on your perspective, you
Yes,
know.
and that animates people, right? That animates people to like bust windows and break into the Capitol. Like, um, so yeah, I think that like, we're not being hooked up to machines or hypnotized or have chips put in your brains, but there is like something of this.
Or are we? And
Well, I
and
don't know. We got to get
we're
some
all just
ECT.
we're all just in the matrix, and this
Right.
is just all something that we're just all dreaming while we're hooked up to
Yeah.
where we're
You
being
want to
used as
take the
batteries.
you want to take the red pill or the blue pill?
Blue pill, exactly. So let me
Um,
see if that thing's
I
sticking in
know.
the back of my
Everybody, when you're
neck.
showering tonight, just feel around your upper back.
Yeah, around your
Um,
scapula. So
yeah. Check your cervical vertebrae. Um, but yeah, I think it does feel like very prescient still.
I think the story resonates, and then because yeah, regardless of when it was set, whether it was in the '60s or the early 2000s, or even if you redid it today,
And I
you know.
think that the people in these movies, like the three main people, right? The people who played Bennett Marco, so Frank Sinatra and Denzel, the people who played Raymond Shaw and the people who played Eleanor, I think their performances carried it, right? Because you have
Oh yeah.
you have Bennett Marco, who are people like Frank Sinatra and Denzel Washington are two people who are very like cool and charming, but they are like unhinged in this
Hmm.
movie. Like you see them kind of unravel, which is not always something that you get from those people. Like right, like I haven't seen really any Frank Sinatra movies, but like seeing Frank Sinatra generally, right? He's like the
Yeah.
sort of blue, right? He's smooth and singing and like the blue eyes and all that. And then Denzel, I think of him, like the last thing we watched when he was Dudley, right? He's
Hmm.
he's charming and like vibrant and like draws you in. And in this one, he's very different from that.
Agreed. And I think both of them do a really good job, as I do think Schreiber and Lawrence Harvey in portraying uh, Shaw, in that they're so one, they're unlikable
Mm-hmm.
in normal day-to-day stuff, but they're
Hmm.
also so blank. They're like,
Exactly.
and then when they do get activated, or however you want to
Hmm.
put it, or turn, it's like they come to life.
Hmm.
It's they're almost like robots. They are like
Yeah.
robots, and
Yeah. And like even when they're not activated, just like the way they're talking, it's like just quiet and like it's just like nothing. They're just
right.
like,
There's no.
"Hello, mother. What's
Hmm.
happening?" Like it's like they're almost like they're hypnotized all the time, but
All
like
the
you can tell the difference when they are. But it's just like there's, like you said, just blank. It's just like nothing there.
Yeah.
And you can see like they don't like have anything to like animate them in life, right?
Right.
They're sort of like, even outside of being hypnotized, they just do what their mom says.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like have beliefs or like love or relationships. They're just like
Oh,
a
they
body
both
filling a role.
they hate their mother,
They hate her, but it's like,
but
but
then
she
they
has power over them that they can't like resist. Because I even like he says in the 1962 one when she made him like he says, I forget exactly, but it's like I don't know how she did, like she always wins.
yeah.
I don't know like how she does, but like she always wins.
Well, and even in the 2004, I think he said like after he got out of the army, and it, or whatever, he said then he came back and he says, "Why did you come back?" He goes, "Because it was my mother." It's
Hmm.
even though he hated her, he came home. He came
Hmm.
came back to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever that pull or power or but you could see, I think, in going to them, both Angela Lansbury and Meryl Streep, how strong they portrayed those characters. How
Hmm.
how
Hmm.
dominating they were. In the first one, Angela not only over her husband, because he was just a drunk.
Yeah. He was very stupid.
He was just a puppet, but also, and her son. But in the
Hmm.
second one, not only over Raymond, but also all the other politicians playing in that field.
Hmm.
She was not just on equal footing; she was over and above them.
Hmm.
She knew where she was dealing from. She was dealing from
Yeah.
a position of authority.
Exactly. They had such power and such, and like there was just no questioning.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
this is, I'm saying this and I know, like I know you don't want to do this and you know you don't want to do this, but also you know you're going to do this
right.
because I said you're going to do
Yeah,
it.
I'm going to speak it into being.
Yeah.
It's when I say it,
Because
it's
I'm
going to
saying it,
happen.
it's going to happen.
Yeah. Uh,
And it's why, and they're so cold too.
oh yeah.
Cold.
It was, yeah, just brutal. And
Hmm.
and how the
Even in the second one when Meryl Streep was like telling him the plan in this like I said, this sort of like sing-songy mommy voice, the way she's talking about people being killed so casually.
yeah. Well, in both instances, she ordered him to kill the senator and Jocelyn. It's
Hmm.
like just you just got to do that. You just got to get him out of the way. That's
Hmm.
it. And no ifs, ands, or buts.
Exactly. And like no regrets. Like
No.
even if they had problems with like how he was hypnotized and created, they weren't like
Yeah.
upset about it. They weren't like,
Right.
how, oh no, what have I done to my son? They were like,
Yeah, or
well,
he's a murderer,
right. They're
and
like, here we go. This is what
yeah,
we're doing.
that's right. This is how we get this thing done. We get this.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. So yeah, I think that they make me think a lot, both of them.
well, I to me, like I said, the first one made an impact on me just seeing it, and we'll do 7 Days in May, another John Frankenheimer, which is
Hmm.
about an attempted coup on the U.S. government.
Yeah.
But
Well, prescient. So yeah, I
so
mean the the picks the picks that I'm making for January, I think you'll get a sense of what I feel about
okay.
the new administration. But we have we're kind of living in a sort of semi-political world, I
Mm-hmm.
think, this month. So just
Oh,
given kind
for
of what's
sure.
going on, yeah, we'll have some good discussions and I'm interested to see what people think. And
And I hope that well, that we give them two options. You can either watch the classic black and white from '62, or watch the 2004, or watch both if you want to. But I think
Mhm.
either one will give you a good sense of the I think that brings out the background and the story of paranoia, uh, espionage, that sort of thing.
Power.
Power, yeah, power, most certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Well, I think that was a good discussion.
Yeah,
I hope, yeah, this kicks the month off right. Kicks off 2025.
let's hope.
Yeah, let's manifest some goodness let's make 2025 as good as it can be. Well, thank you very much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to this so you can get our new episodes every Monday when they come out. You can rate and review and leave comments. Hopefully, they're nice comments, or else we will have to call Raymond Shaw on you. Who knows?
Maybe you could just play a game of solitaire.
Yeah, why don't you play a game of solitaire? Please check out our Instagram, Some of Our Parts Pod. You can see all the other movies that we've talked about, little previews of what's coming next, and whatever else we decide to post. And with that, bye bye.
Happy New Year.